This is it. This is the moment we have been waiting for, the moment that every single hardworking American who has been looked down upon by the Washington elite has prayed for. For years, we have watched a specific brand of politician operate in the swamp with absolute impunity, treating our intelligence agencies like their personal opposition research firms and treating the American people like absolute fools. They lie to our faces. They leak classified information to their friends in the media to score cheap political points, and they hide behind the veil of national security whenever anyone dares to ask a tough question. But today, the game changed. Today, the music stopped for one of the most entrenched, arrogant, and destructive career politicians in modern history, and the sound of his career crashing down was the sweetest symphony legitimate patriots have heard in a long, long time. You need to understand that what happened in that Senate hearing room wasn't just a debate, and it wasn't just standard political theater. It was a reckoning. It was the moment where the rubber finally met the road and the slick, polished veneer of the establishment was ripped away to reveal the rotting corruption underneath. This matters to you because for the last decade, men like Adam Schiff have been the architects of your reality. They have decided what news you get to see. They have decided who is a patriot and who is a traitor based solely on their own political survival, and they have used the power of the federal government to hunt down their enemies while their friends get a free pass. When a politician can weaponize intelligence against the people, you don't have a republic anymore. You have a tyranny with better PR. Think about the gas prices you pay, think about the border crisis that they ignore, and think about the endless foreign wars that drain our treasury and our blood. All of that is sustained by a system that refuses to be held accountable, a system where the people in charge fail upwards. Adam Schiff has been the poster boy for that system. He is the face of the permanent political class that believes they rule over us, not represent us. He has spent years looking into the camera with those bug eyes, promising bombshells that never exploded, peddling hoaxes that tore this country apart, and acting as the self-appointed moral arbiter of the nation. But when you strip away the CNN interviews and the glowing profiles in the New York Times, what are you left with? You are left with a man who built a career on deception. And that is why the confrontation with Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard is historical. It is not just about Schiff losing his job. It is about the entire establishment losing its grip. Tulsi Gabbard didn't walk into that hearing room as just another bureaucrat. She walked in as a soldier. She walked in as someone who has worn the uniform, who has seen the cost of war, and who has been on the receiving end of the very smear machine that Schiff operates. The contrast couldn't have been more poetic. On one side, you have the career politician in the $5,000 suit who has never seen a consequence in his life. On the other side, you have the veteran who has been slandered, maligned, and attacked by her own former party, standing tall with nothing but the truth in her hands. The atmosphere in D.C. before this hearing was electric, but it was also filled with that typical smug arrogance we have come to expect from the Democrats. They thought this was going to be another ambush. They thought they were going to drag Gabbard in there, humiliate her, paint her as incompetent or dangerous, and then cut clips for the evening news to keep their base angry. Schiff, in particular, looked like the cat that had just swallowed the canary. You could see it in his body language as he shuffled his papers, leaning over to whisper to his aides with that tight, condescending smirk. He truly believed he was untouchable. He believed that because he had the media in his pocket and the donor class on speed dial, he could say whatever he wanted without fear of contradiction. But here is the thing about bullies. They are always brave until they get punched in the mouth. And Schiff was walking into a buzzsaw that he never saw coming. This is the problem with the DC bubble. They spend so much time talking to each other, smelling their own fumes, and reinforcing their own delusions that they forget what reality looks like. They forget that out here in the real world, facts still matter. They forget that eventually, the check comes due. Schiff prepared for a political debate. He prepared for a battle of sound bites. He didn't prepare for a court-martial. He didn't prepare for a forensic dissection of his entire career. When the hearing began, Schiff wasted no time going to his favorite playbook. He opened with that theatrical, breathless tone he always uses, the one where he pretends to be the lone guardian of democracy. He launched immediately into the Russian asset narrative. It is the only trick he knows. If you disagree with the establishment, you must be working for Putin. It is a tired, lazy, and frankly insulting tactic that they have used against everyone from Donald Trump to concerned parents at school board meetings. Schiff sat there and looked Gabbard in the eye and essentially accused her of treason. He tried to frame her appointment as a danger to national security, weaving this intricate web of conspiracy theories that sounded more like a bad spy novel than a congressional inquiry. For the average viewer, this was infuriating. Here is a man who spent years pushing the Steele dossier, a document we now know was complete garbage paid for by the Clinton campaign, having the audacity to lecture anyone about foreign influence. It was the height of hypocrisy. It was a masterclass in projection. He was accusing her of exactly what he and his cronies have been doing for years, manipulating intelligence to serve a foreign or domestic political agenda. But unlike the Republicans of the past who might have cowered or tried to play nice, Gabbard didn't flinch. She didn't interrupt him. She didn't get emotional. She just sat there, stone cold, watching him dig his own grave. This is what leadership looks like. In the face of unhinged accusations, you don't scream, you wait. You let the enemy expend their ammunition. Schiff went on, growing more confident with every sentence, thinking he was scoring points. He was playing to the cameras, making sure he got the soundbite for MSNBC later that night. He talked about integrity and oversight, words that should turn to ash in his mouth. He painted himself as the brave inquisitor and Gabbard as the compromised suspect. It was a performance, pure and simple. A performance designed to distract the American people from the fact that their country is falling apart under the leadership of people like him. But then, he stopped. He leaned back, satisfied, waiting for her to stammer or apologize. And that is when the room shifted. That is when the temperature dropped about 20 degrees. Tulsi Gabbard didn't reach for a microphone to offer a defense. She didn't appeal to the chairman for order. Instead, she reached down and produced 6 folders. They weren't thin, flimsy little things. These were thick, heavy files. She placed them on the desk in front of her with a deliberate, heavy thud that seemed to echo through the entire chamber. That sound was the sound of the hammer cocking back. You have to appreciate the psychological warfare of that moment. Schiff is used to dealing with people who bring talking points. He is used to dealing with people who bring spin. He was not prepared for someone who brought receipts. The look on his face flickered. Just for a second, the mask slipped. You could see the confusion in his eyes. He glanced at the folders, then back at her, then back at the folders. He knew, deep down in that politician's gut of his, that something was wrong. This wasn't part of the script. This wasn't how the day was supposed to go. Gabbard's opening statement wasn't a defense. It was an indictment. She looked him dead in the eye and told him that while he was busy spinning fairy tales about Russian collusion to get booked on Sunday morning talk shows, she had been doing the actual work of reviewing the archives. She had been doing the job that the oversight committees were supposed to do but never did because they were too busy covering for their friends. She told him that those folders contained the history of his tenure. Not the history he wrote in his memoirs, but the real history. The classified history. The history of lies, leaks, and abuse of power that had been buried under redactions and executive privilege for far too long. This is the core of the MAGA movement, isn't it? It is the demand for transparency. It is the demand that these people who live in their ivory towers be subject to the same laws and standards as the rest of us. If you or I lied to the FBI, we would go to jail. If you or I leaked classified documents to a reporter to hurt a coworker, we would be in handcuffs before lunch. But Adam Schiff has done this for years and been celebrated for it. He has been given awards for it. He has raised millions of dollars off of it. Gabbard was there to tell him that the free ride was over. She opened the first folder. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. Even the other senators, the ones who usually spend hearings checking their phones or napping, were sitting up straight. They smelled blood in the water. In D.C., loyalty is a mile wide and an inch deep. As soon as a predator becomes prey, the pack turns. Gabbard began to lay it out, methodically, surgically. She didn't scream, she didn't shout. She just read the facts. She detailed specific instances where Schiff had knowingly misled the American public about intelligence assessments. We aren't talking about differences of opinion here. We are talking about cold, hard proof that he had information in front of him that contradicted what he was saying on television, and he said it anyway. She cited dates. She cited document numbers. She cited specific meetings where Schiff was briefed on the truth, only to walk out the door and lie to the cameras 5 minutes later. This strikes at the very heart of our republic. We trust these people with our secrets. We trust them to make life and death decisions based on that intelligence. When they use that access to manipulate the electorate, they are stealing our vote. They are stealing our ability to make informed decisions. The first folder was a gut punch because it dismantled his credibility. Schiff's entire brand is "I know something you don't know." He plays the role of the solemn expert. But Gabbard showed the world that he isn't an expert. He is a propagandist. She revealed how he coordinated with partisan operatives to plant stories in the press, stories that were false, and then used those same press reports as corroborating evidence in congressional hearings. It is a circular fraud, a snake eating its own tail. He creates the lie, feeds it to the media reports it, and then he cites the report to justify an investigation. It is a perfect machine of deception, and Gabbard took a wrench and jammed it right into the gears. As she spoke, you could see Schiff shrinking. He tried to interrupt, he tried to bluster, claiming she was mischaracterizing the data, but she shut him down instantly. "The data is right here, Senator," she said. "Would you like me to read it into the record?" That is the ultimate power move. He couldn't say yes, because he knew it would damn him. He couldn't say no, because it would look like he was hiding something. So he just sat there, mouth agape, looking like a fish pulled out of water. The color was draining from his face. The donors in the gallery were shifting uncomfortably. They knew their investment was tanking in real time. But the first folder was just the warm-up. It was just establishing the pattern of behavior. The real damage, the real betrayal, was yet to come. Because while lying to the public is bad, leaking classified information that gets people killed is treason. And that is where Gabbard was heading next. She was steering the ship right into the darkest waters of Schiff's career, the places he thought were sealed shut forever. This wasn't just about politics anymore. This was about blood. Think about the men and women who serve in the shadows, the intelligence assets who risk their lives in hostile nations to keep us safe. Their safety depends entirely on the silence and integrity of the people in Washington. When a politician leaks a detail to make himself look important or to hurt a political rival, he puts a target on the back of every one of those assets. Gabbard, as a soldier, takes that personally. You could hear the steel in her voice as she moved to the second folder. This wasn't a game to her. This was about honor. And Adam Schiff has none. The American people are tired of the double standard. We saw Hillary Clinton bleach her servers and smash her phones and walk away scot-free. We saw the FBI lie to the FISA court to spy on President Trump's campaign and nobody went to jail. We have been told over and over again that this is just how it works, that we have to accept it. But today, looking at Adam Schiff's sweat through his expensive suit, we realize that we don't have to accept it. We realize that all it takes is one person with courage, one person who isn't owned by the special interests, to stand up and say enough. This hearing is a turning point. It is the moment the deep state blinked. For decades, they have operated in the dark, confident that no one would ever have the access or the guts to challenge them. But they forgot that the truth has a funny way of coming out. They forgot that you can't build a kingdom on a foundation of lies and expect it to stand forever. Adam Schiff is just the first domino. He is the symptom of the disease, and Tulsi Gabbard is the cure. As she prepared to open that next folder, the one that dealt with the leaks and the compromised operations, the entire room held its breath. The narrative was collapsing. The media's golden boy was about to be exposed as a fraud of the highest order. And the best part? It was all on the record. The second folder. This wasn't just paper. This was a tombstone. When Tulsi Gabbard placed her hand on that second file, the air in the room didn't just get heavy, it became unbreathable. You could see the senators on the Democratic side of the aisle, the ones who usually flank Schiff like a Praetorian guard, start to physically distance themselves. They were leaning away, checking their watches, shuffling papers. In Washington, that is the universal sign that the ship is sinking and the rats are looking for the nearest exit. They knew what was coming. They knew because they have whispered about it in the cloakrooms for years, but they never thought anyone would have the gall to put it on the public record. Gabbard opened the folder and the headline she read wasn't a statistic. It was a location, Yemen. Now, to the average CNN watcher, Yemen is just a place on a map where bad things happen. But to anyone who understands the intricate, deadly game of counterterrorism, Yemen is a grinder. It is a place where American special operators and intelligence assets walk a razor's edge every single day. One wrong move, one loose lip, and people die. Gabbard began to detail a specific timeline. She laid out a classified operation that had been years in the making, an operation designed to take out a high-value target that posed a direct threat to the US homeland. This wasn't a political game. This was about keeping bombs off of American airplanes. She described how the intelligence had been compartmentalized, locked down tight. Only a handful of people knew the details: the operators on the ground, the president, and the Gang of 8 in Congress. Adam Schiff was one of those people. And then, she held up a copy of the New York Times from 3 days after that briefing. There, on the front page, were details that only those few people could have known. Details that compromised the operation. Details that forced the CIA to burn a network of assets that took a decade to build. Schiff tried to interject. He cleared his throat, his voice cracking just a little, a sound we haven't heard from him in 20 years. "Director Gabbard," he stammered, "this is highly irregular. We cannot discuss classified." She cut him off. Not with a shout, but with a gaze that could have melted steel. "The only thing irregular, Senator, is that you are still sitting in that chair. The time for hiding behind classification to cover your crimes is over." These leaks were not whistleblowing. They were political ammunition. And there it was. The truth we all knew but were told was a conspiracy theory. Gabbard connected the dots. She showed that the leak hit the press exactly 48 hours before a critical midterm election debate. The goal wasn't to inform the public. The goal was to sabotage a Republican administration's foreign policy win. The goal was to make the president look incompetent, to make the operation look like a failure, so Schiff and his party could point a finger and say, "See? They don't know what they're doing." Think about the sickness of that. Think about the absolute moral rot required to trade the lives of American assets for a bump in the polling numbers. Gabbard didn't let him off the hook. She looked at the cameras, not at Schiff, but at the American people, and she said, "Because of this leak, 2 local assets in Yemen were executed. They were our eyes and ears. They died because a politician in a secure room in Washington, D.C. wanted a headline." The silence that followed was deafening. This is the part the media never shows you. They cut to commercial when it gets real. But in that room, you could hear the career of Adam Schiff flatlining. The donors in the gallery, the people who pay for the ads, who fund the super PACS. I guarantee you, in that moment, their phones were lighting up. Cut him loose. Distance us. Issue a statement that we have no comment. Money has no loyalty, and it moves fast when it smells a loser. And right then, Adam Schiff smelled like political death. But Gabbard wasn't done. She didn't come to wound him. She came to finish it. She moved to the 3rd and 4th folders. If the first was about lies and the second was about blood, these next ones were about the abuse of the very machinery of government. This is the stuff that should terrify every single American, regardless of who you voted for. This is the police state stuff that the Founding Fathers warned us about. She revealed evidence that Schiff used his power as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee not just to oversee the intelligence agencies, but to weaponize them against private citizens. She produced subpoenas that had been kept quiet, targeting the phone records of journalists who were critical of him. Not foreign spies. Not terrorists. American journalists. He was hunting down their sources. He was trying to figure out who was leaking the truth about his corruption. It was a Stasi tactic. It was something you expect to see in East Germany in the 1970s, not in the United States Senate. Gabbard laid out the pattern. Anyone who questioned the narrative, anyone who poked holes in the Russia collusion hoax, suddenly found themselves under investigation. Suddenly, their tax records were being looked at. Suddenly, they were being dragged in for closed-door depositions that cost them thousands of dollars in legal fees. It was harassment, pure and simple. It was the government acting as a mob enforcer for the Democratic Party. Schiff was shaking now. Visibly shaking. He grabbed his water glass, and his hand trembled so much that water spilled onto the mahogany table. He looked around for support, for his allies in the media to jump up and shout objection. But the press gallery was silent too. Even they, the lapdogs of the establishment, couldn't spin this. The evidence was too physical. It was right there on the table. 6 stacks of paper that weighed more than Schiff's entire career. You treated the Intelligence Committee as your personal opposition research firm, Gabbard said, her voice steady and low. You violated the Fourth Amendment rights of Americans because you couldn't handle criticism. That is not oversight, Senator. That is tyranny. The word tyranny hung in the air. It resonated. Because that is what we have been feeling for years, isn't it? When they tell you what car you can drive, what stove you can use, what words you can say, that is tyranny. But this was the hard proof of the mechanism behind it. This was the engine room of the deep state being exposed to the light of day. At this point, Schiff tried a desperate Hail Mary. He tried to pivot to the integrity of the institution. He started rambling about how attacks on him were attacks on the intelligence community itself. It is the classic shield of the scoundrel. I am the state, he was essentially saying. If you hurt me, you hurt America. But Gabbard was ready. This is why she is dangerous to them. She doesn't play by their unspoken rules. She laughed. A dry, humorless laugh. Senator, she said, the intelligence community is made up of patriots who want to protect this country. You are the one who has dragged their reputation through the mud to save your own skin. The men and women at Langley and the Pentagon despise what you have done. I am here speaking for them, not against them. That was the kill shot. She severed his connection to the very institutions he claimed to represent. She stripped him of his armor. He was no longer the chairman. He was just a man in a suit who had been caught red-handed. The reaction from the other senators was telling. The ranking Republican member, who had often been too timid to challenge Schiff directly, finally found his spine. He leaned into his microphone and asked, Director Gabbard, are you suggesting that these actions warrant a criminal referral? Gabbard didn't hesitate. She placed her hand on the 5th folder. Senator, the Department of Justice already has these files. What happens next is up to the Attorney General. But as far as the intelligence community is concerned, Adam Schiff's security clearance is under immediate review. As of this morning, his access to sensitive compartmented information has been suspended pending the outcome of this investigation. Suspended. The word rippled through the room like a shockwave. Adam Schiff, the man who built his entire identity on knowing the secrets, had just been locked out of the building. Without his clearance, he is useless to the establishment. He is useless to the donors. He is a general without an army. You could see the realization wash over him. It wasn't just a bad hearing. It was the end. The power was gone. The leverage was gone. Schiff's face went from pale to a flushed, angry red. He started to sputter, trying to bang his gavel, forgetting he wasn't the chairman of this committee. You can't do that. I am a United States Senator. This is political retaliation. No, Senator, Gabbard replied, closing the folders and stacking them neatly. This is consequences. Something you have avoided for far too long. The cameras zoomed in on Schiff. He looked small. He looked defeated. The arrogance that had defined him for the last 6 years had evaporated, leaving behind a frightened little man who realized the protection racket was over. The narrative had flipped. For years, they told us that we were the threat. They told us that MAGA was dangerous, that asking questions was dangerous. But in 1 hour, Tulsi Gabbard showed the world that the real threat to our democracy was sitting right there in the Senate, wearing a D pin on his lapel. This moment matters because it proves that the system can be beaten. They want you to believe that the deep state is omnipotent, that resistance is futile. They want you to give up, to tune out, to accept their rule. But what happened between Gabbard and Schiff proves that when you have the facts, and you have the courage to present them without apology, their house of cards collapses. But the story doesn't end with the hearing. The fallout was just beginning. As Schiff stumbled out of that room, ignoring the questions shouted by reporters who were suddenly very interested in doing their jobs, the machinery of DC began to eat its own. The leaks about the leaks started. Staffers, seeing the writing on the wall, started calling journalists to save their own reputations. "I didn't know," they said. "I was just following orders." The collapse was total. And let's not forget the role of the people in this. While this was happening, the phones in the Capitol switchboard were melting down. Thousands of calls. Not from bots, not from Russian troll farms, but from you. From American citizens who were watching the live stream and finally seeing justice in action. The pressure was immense. The Democratic leadership, who would normally circle the wagons, remained silent. They knew they couldn't defend him. To defend Schiff now would be to tie themselves to the sinking anchor of his corruption. So what did we see? We saw the isolation of a swamp creature. We saw the true face of the establishment when the lights get turned on. They are cowards. Every single one of them. They only have power because we give it to them, and because they hide what they do in the dark. Tulsi Gabbard just turned on the floodlights. This is the victory of the America First mindset. It's not about party labels anymore. It's about the people versus the machine. Gabbard, a former Democrat, destroying the idol of the Democratic establishment, proves that this movement is bigger than traditional politics. It's a coalition of reality. A coalition of everyone who is sick of the lies. As we move into the final act of this drama, we have to look at how Schiff tried to survive the next 24 hours. Because a creature like that doesn't go down without trying to burn everything else down with him. He made calls. He threatened. He tried to call in favors that were decades old. But he found out the hard way that in the swamp, you are only as good as your last lie. And his last lie had just been exposed to the world. The 24 hours following that hearing were a masterclass in how a narrative dies. You could physically feel the shift in the atmosphere. Usually, when a Democrat gets in trouble, they circle the wagons. The corporate media machine spins up its engines. CNN, MSNBC, The Washington Post, they all start printing the same headlines, using the same keywords, trying to convince you that what you saw with your own eyes didn't actually happen. They usually call it Russian disinformation or a right-wing smear campaign. But this time, the silence was absolute. The talking heads were stunned. They were paralyzed because Tulsi Gabbard hadn't just attacked Schiff, she had brought the receipts. There was no spin room left. You can't spin a suspended security clearance. You can't spin a paper trail of dead intelligence assets. Schiff went back to his office, and by all accounts, the phone stopped ringing. That is the loneliest sound in Washington. The cocktail party invitations, the fundraisers, the strategy calls with leadership, it all dried up instantly. The Democratic leadership, the people who had used Schiff as their attack dog for years, decided right then and there that he was too toxic to touch. They did the cold, calculated calculus of power and realized that if they tried to defend him, they would go down with him. So they cut the rope. It was brutal, it was cynical, and it was exactly what he deserved. But we need to talk about that sixth folder. I mentioned earlier that Gabbard had 6 folders, and by the end of the hearing, she had only fully weaponized 5. The 6th one sat there on the table, closed, like a loaded gun that hadn't been fired yet. And that, my friends, was the checkmate. That was the leverage that ensured Schiff wouldn't just fight this out in the press for months. It ensured he would be gone by the end of the week. Word began to leak out later that evening about what was in that final dossier. And this is where the America First movement is vindicated once again. It wasn't just about power, and it wasn't just about ideology. It is always, always about the money. The sixth folder allegedly contained the financial tracking of Schiff's connections to defense contractors and foreign lobbyists. It detailed how his hawkish stances, his constant push for conflict with Russia, his demands for more proxy wars, coincidentally lined up with donations to his political network and lucrative positions for his inner circle. This is the uni-party grift in a nutshell. They send your kids to die in wars that don't matter to American sovereignty, and in exchange, their portfolios go up. They launder the blood of patriots into stock dividends. Gabbard knew this. She didn't even have to open the folder during the hearing. She just had to let him know she had it. The threat of that financial exposure, the kind that leads not just to resignation but to prison time, was the final nail in the coffin. Schiff knew that if he kept fighting, that sixth folder would be the next thing released to the public. So, the next morning, we didn't get a defiant press conference. We didn't get Adam Schiff screaming about democracy. We got a typed statement. A whimpering, pathetic, 2-paragraph statement released on a Friday afternoon. The classic trash dump time slot where politicians hope nobody is watching. He announced his resignation from the United States Senate, effective immediately. He cited personal health reasons and a desire to spend more time with his family. Don't you just love that? Family. These people would sell their own grandmothers for a Senate seat, but suddenly when the heat gets turned up, they become family men. It is the ultimate insult to our intelligence. He didn't quit because he wanted to go to his kids' soccer games. He quit because Tulsi Gabbard held a mirror up to his face and he couldn't stand the reflection. He quit because the deep state, the very apparatus he worshipped, realized he was a liability and flushed him. The scene of him leaving his office for the final time should be framed in every American history book. There were no crowds cheering. There were no tearful staffers lining the hallways. He walked out a back exit, flanked by security, avoiding the press, carrying a single box of personal items. It was the walk of shame of a man who thought he was a king, only to realize he was just a pawn. But while we celebrate this victory, and make no mistake, it is a massive victory, we have to stay vigilant. Because Adam Schiff was just one man. He was a symbol, yes, but he was also just a cog in a much larger machine. The system that created Adam Schiff is still there. The donors who funded him are still writing checks. The media outlets that covered for him are still broadcasting. They are already looking for the next Adam Schiff, the next empty chute they can fill with their agenda and prop up in front of a camera. However, something has fundamentally changed. The veil has been pierced. For a long time, the American people felt helpless. We shouted at our televisions, we posted on social media, but nothing seemed to change. The swamp seemed too deep, too thick to drain. But this event proved that it is possible. It proved that when you have leaders who are fearless, who articulate, and who are armed with the truth, the giants can be toppled. Tulsi Gabbard showed the Republican Party what actual opposition looks like. It's not about writing sternly worded letters or going on Fox News to complain. It's about using the power of the office to expose the rot. This is the blueprint for the future. This is what we expect from our leaders now. We don't want reach across the aisle compromises with people who hate us. We don't want civility with people who are actively trying to destroy the country. We want accountability. We want folders. We want receipts. We want to see the evidence laid out on the table, and we want to see the guilty walk out the back door. The resignation of Adam Schiff is a warning shot to every other swamp creature in DC. It says, "We see you. We know what you are doing. And there are people coming who aren't afraid of your blackmail or your media smears. The era of the untouchable politician is over. And think about what this does for the morale of the country. For the first time in a long time, it feels like justice isn't just a word, it's an action. It feels like the good guys actually won one. That feeling is powerful. It's contagious. It wakes people up. It makes the mechanic in Ohio and the teacher in Florida and the rancher in Texas realize that their vote, their voice, and their support actually matter. It re-engages the citizenry. The left is terrified of this. They are terrified because their entire power structure relies on you being demoralized. They rely on you thinking, oh well, they're all crooks, nothing matters. But when you see a head roll, when you see a titan fall, you start to believe again. And a believing, engaged, patriotic populace is the deep state's worst nightmare. As we look at the empty seat where Adam Schiff used to sit, let it be a reminder. Let it be a monument to the fact that lies have an expiration date. He spent years weaving a tapestry of deception. Russia, Ukraine, impeachment, January 6th, he had a hand in it all. He was the conductor of the orchestra of hysteria. And in the end, it wasn't a foreign army that took him down. It wasn't a violent revolution. It was one woman, sitting calmly at a table, telling the truth. The truth is a lion. You don't have to defend it. You just have to let it loose. Tulsi Gabbard let the lion loose in the Senate chamber, and it devoured Adam Schiff. Now, the question becomes, who is next? Because Schiff wasn't working alone. He had enablers. He had co-conspirators in the FBI, the CIA, and the DOJ. The files in those folders didn't just have his name on them. They had names of other senators, other congressmen, high-ranking bureaucrats who have been hiding in the shadows. The door has been kicked open, and we cannot let them close it again. We need to demand that the investigation continues. We need to demand that the contents of those folders be declassified in full, not redacted, not blacked out, but released to the American people. We paid for that intelligence. We deserve to see the extent of the betrayal. This is the fight of our generation. It is a fight between the sovereign citizens of the United States and a permanent political class that views us as subjects. Today, we won a battle. A big one. But the war is far from over. We have to keep the pressure on. We have to support the leaders who are willing to walk into the fire, like Gabbard did. We have to be the army at their backs. So, when you see the mainstream media trying to sweep this under the rug in the coming weeks, when you see them trying to rewrite history and turn Schiff into a martyr, don't let them. Remember what happened. Remember the fear in his eyes. Remember the silence of his colleagues. Remember the power of the truth. Tell your friends, tell your family. Make sure everyone knows that the king had no clothes, and when he was finally exposed, he ran away. America is waking up. The sleepy giant is stirring. And God help the politicians who try to stand in its way now. The standard has been set. If you lie to us, if you spy on us, if you sell us out, we will find you, we will expose you, and we will remove you. Adam Schiff was the first. He will not be the last. This is what draining the swamp looks like in practice. It's ugly, it's tense, it's messy, but it is glorious. It is the restoration of the Republic, one corrupt career at a time. So take a moment to savor this. Pour yourself a drink, look at the flag, and smile. Because for once, the bad guys lost. And the good guys, the real Americans, are just getting started.